ChatGPT and Claude are called. They're called a large language model. They're just kind of bunches of information. So it's kind of like you can tell it, I want you to think about this. I want you to act like you have this perspective. And then ask it to do something. So say, act as a evangelical pastor of a large growing church, period. And then give it something to do. So you could say, give me perspective on this. Help me brainstorm this. I'm trying to write an email. I'm trying to write a newsletter, and just give it something to do and let it write something. And so that's a really easy way to get started. But I wanted to mention that's called giving it a persona. As Christians and pastors get started using AI, start by giving it a Christian perspective, and then you can start giving it a task and something you want it to do.
Welcome to the Post-Christian Podcast, where we help you make disciples in our increasingly post-Christian world. My name is Eric Bryant. I'm the campus pastor at Gateway in South Austin and Gateway Austin Online. I'm also the founder of Catalyzing Community. Sign up for our email newsletter at ericbryant.org and we'll send you free resources. On today's episode of the Post-Christian Podcast, I have with me Dr. David Thorne. How are you doing, David?
You're doing great.
Well, I recently had a consultation with you, and we're going to talk about AI for churches. But before we jump into that, I found it incredibly helpful. I'm excited to continue the conversation, but I wanted to just, for our church leaders who are in an increasingly post-Christian world, what are some ways in your missional marketing endeavors as a consultant, a coach, what are some of the things you're seeing churches do really well to reach new people and even make disciples?
Yeah, I would say that churches today really have to go after the pain point underneath whatever the needs are. That's what we've seen in the churches that are really working and doing well, is they're kind of identifying what are those base level needs that people have. How can we let people know that we can address those needs? Even if maybe the direct need isn't always just spiritual in nature, but what's underneath that? And we've seen a lot of churches do that. Along with that, of course, we've seen people just using things like AI platforms to offer options for ways for churches to take their sermon content further, to help their sermon content live beyond Sunday. And that's a discipleship process, and AI is a big way to do that.
Well, and I want to talk about that because, there may be some that are listening to this and they've heard AI, they saw the Terminator movies, there's a fear based around AI and the terrible things it could do, taking jobs away, or maybe in a not as serious existential way, they just aren't sure how to use it in a way that doesn't seem like you're cheating. How would you address kind of these concerns, the existential threat of AI first, and then what are some ethical ways you can really use it?
Yeah, I'll give this framework. How do you feel about a calculator? And not you personally, just people in the world. We've come to grips that if I was going to multiply 1 million by 582, a calculator is a better job at doing that than it can do it faster than I could. AI is like a calculator for language. And so it is a new calculator that we can all get used to using. Is a calculator cheating? Maybe a little bit. But in the end, what it is it's an amazing tool that helps us do more with less time. Now, as for the existential crisis part, here's what I would say. We have lived, imagine this is the analogy I use all the time. To be honest, we've lived in a world of horses our entire life. Our parents owned horses, our grandparents owned horses. Everyone we've ever known has ridden a horse to work and around town and used it on the farm. And all of a sudden, cars have been introduced to the world. We now live in a world of cars, and we as people have the choice to say, are we going to buy a car or are we going to fight to keep riding our horse? Because that's what we've always done. And in some ways, that's where I'd say is it's not really a choice that we get to make because AI is built and is being built into every single online interaction that we have, period. So there's not really a choice in whether we want to use AI or not. We are using AI. The choice we have to make is like the calculator choice. Are we going to pick up the calculator and purposefully use it to save us time and do things faster? Or not.
I did see a TED Talk recently with a woman who's right in the middle of all this, who really feels like a lot of those fears are not just overblown, but even the capacity for AI to continue to take on more and more may be reaching its peak. I don't know if you've heard some of this, but maybe share a little bit more on that side of things.
Yeah.
What really could it help us do, and why not to fear it?
So I'll say this. I was at the AI conference just this past fall. And one of the most interesting things, these are the top AI people in the entire world who are talking about where we are with AI. And what they were saying, like, Google and, all these, NVIDIA, all these guys. And they said where we're moving next is kind of beyond what AI can do. And we're moving into, they said that the world of AI needs ethicists and people that can help with rational reasoning. And we're moving away from needing more programmers and needing more people to think through morality. And that's kind of where we're going next. And just saying that, people that I'm friends with and who work with AI, work in AI stuff, we always just kind of joke tongue in cheek of, we always try to say please every now and again, just so if the AI ever takes over, it'll look on us kindly for being, kind to it. Regarding the jobs, this is a very important thing to note. Here's what I would say. AI is not going to take over the world, but people leaning into and using AI are going to go further, faster than those who don't. And I'd say this for the church world and for pastors out there. AI is not going to take over your church, but churches that lean into using AI are going to go faster, go further, grow better, grow more healthy than those churches that are choosing to keep riding their horse.
Well, I've enjoyed your Facebook group, AI for Churches, your website, AI-4, not the number, but the word, FOR-churches.com, and also your podcast. And you've been in that, along with some of your co-hosts and guests, talking about some of those ways pastors can effectively, ethically use AI. Maybe share a few of those for those who haven't jumped into it, or for those who have, but maybe haven't tried some of these methods of getting better at what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll tell you, here's like a very, very simple way to start I'll give you can start with ChatGPT, which is one a lot of people know about. There's also Claude.ai. Those are the two most common and probably the ones I use the most. When you go to one of those, the first thing you want to do is say, act as, give it a Christian context. So people complain about, bias or whatever. To be honest, all these large language models, that's what ChatGPT and Claude are called. They're called a large language model. They're just kind of bunches of information. So it's kind of like you can tell it, I want you to think about this. I want you to act like you have this perspective. And then ask it to do something. So say, act as a evangelical pastor of a large growing church, period. And then give it something to do. So you could say, give me perspective on this. Help me brainstorm this. I'm trying to write an email. I'm trying to write a newsletter, and just tell it, give it something to do and let it write something. And so that's a really easy way to get started. But I wanted to mention, that's called giving it a persona. As Christians and pastors get started using AI, start by giving it a Christian perspective, and then you can start giving it a task and something you want it to do.
Well, and what I've found in using it is it's a great frame of reference, something you can then edit. You can certainly make more your own. It's a great thought partner, brainstormer. But yeah, even trying to think through, what would be a good analogy to help me share about Jesus to my neighbor who's more into new age thinking. These large language models will give you some really good ideas. One of the things that you'll notice as you use AI is sometimes it's not right. It's a little bit off on a detail here or there. So it's important that you're not just quoting it verbatim, but you're actually taking it and then doing the research and maybe even asking it where to do more research. What are some ways you've seen people use it well when it comes to helping them with their sermon? And then talk about SermonSpark. I mean, this is a product you have been right in the middle of creating.
Yeah. I want to mention just one quick personal thing of just saying, I would say also start using it in your personal life. And as you do, you'll be able to start using it in your professional life. And things like I've been driving in my car and seen a car that I didn't know what it was. So I brought up ChatGPT, the app on my phone, took a picture of the car and said, what car is this? Yesterday, we had a doctor's note that this doctor scribbled out this page about what to do with my son's allergies. And I couldn't read one single word that it was. So I took a picture of it in ChatGPT and said, what does this say? And it told me everything it said. And then I started
Wow.
having a conversation back and forth. What does that mean? What should I do about that? And it was so helpful in helping me translate what the doctor said into real life. So
Wow.
I just wanted to mention that. And transitioning into the sermon world,
Yeah.
AI is so helpful for sermon stuff. We built SermonSpark because a pastor may open ChatGPT or Claude and say, I don't even know what to have it do. So we built a whole series of tools that can help a pastor research and help them in creatively preparing and writing their sermon, and then actually stuff to do after they're finished sharing their sermon. So we have tools like a creative title brainstormer, an outline generator. So if you put in the scripture or topic and what type of outline you want, it can generate an outline. We have the one that's called the Topic Explorer. And I love that tool because imagine as a pastor sitting down on Monday morning and they're thinking through ideas of what are they thinking about preaching this coming week. You can put in those topic ideas into the Topic Explorer and it will give all of those things. If you are preaching on this topic, here's some questions you should ask, some terms you might need to define. Here's how different people might respond to that topic. And it can just really help a pastor think through what it will look like if they were going to address that topic. And then afterwards, on the flip side, once you're done preaching, we can help you create a transcript of your sermon. And on that note, it's kind of a thing that we're proud of. We don't just grab the YouTube transcript. We generate the absolute best transcript that is available on the internet from your sermon. You can choose where you want it to snip in case that you recorded your whole service. And then we have like tools where you can create a blog post, you can create sermon summaries, you can create a devotion, however many days you want, all from the sermon. And the idea is to help pastors help their sermon content live beyond Sunday.
I mean, it's amazing. And even SermonSpark.ai, you can register for free. There's, unlimited possibilities even with what you've developed. You can take a transcript and ask for help in coming up with discussion questions. I used one of the AI websites to create a picture of me in the woods, like I was Snow White, except for instead of a dress, I was wearing, Renaissance clothing for a man. And just a funny moment in a story I shared about really connecting with God in the woods and seeing the birds of the air and reminded of Jesus's words of not worrying because God takes care of those birds. And so that AI image was just a quick, easy addition. Maybe talk about some of the other tools that are out there. Opus Clip is one that I've used. What are some other tools that pastors really should try out at least?
Yeah. So I know what you just said made me think about this, that this is such an easy way that you can use AI for your sermons and on Sunday morning. Pastors typically share a Bible verse in their sermon. There's, a screen behind them that's sharing a Bible verse. And typically it's just kind of a blank screen in the Bible verse. Well, imagine all you have to do is every time there's a Bible verse, is there an image you can put on there? People connect with images faster and more emotionally than we do just words. So for example, if you're talking about the woman at the well and there's a scripture about the woman at the well, go to an image generating platform and create an image of a well or an image of a woman at the well. Or if you're talking about the birds of the air or mountains or whatever you're talking about, go to a platform. And some examples that you can go to are ideogram.ai that you can use for free to create some images up to a certain amount. But that's a really good place to go to just generate those. When I've been doing some presentations recently, I only use AI generated images and I put them on almost every slide. There's images that just kind of represent the content that I'm expressing on that slide. And it's just such an easy, low-hanging fruit way for a pastor or a church to help their content emotionally connect with their congregation. Ideogram.ai, to answer your question.
Yeah.
You mentioned opus.clip. Sermon Shots is another one. That's a very classic one. If you're looking for like a Swiss Army knife AI, Magi is a really great one. The owner of that, his name is Dustin Stout. He's a really great guy. And Magi basically offers a whole bunch of large language models like ChatGPT and Claude, and a whole bunch of image generating platforms, things like Ideogram and others. Yeah. So it's kind of like, that's why it's a Swiss Army knife. You can do all your writing, your word writing, you can do your image creation, and it's kind of a great all-in-one tool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, an Opus clip is something I've used for this podcast, and it just takes my YouTube link and it creates a bunch of shorts from it. And, I have to sometimes go in and edit the words that it didn't quite spell right, or I might want to add some time to it or detract from it. But it really does help with creating more versions of what I actually created. Maybe talk about that for a moment. The ethicists that are needed, and hopefully as followers of Jesus and pastors, we can help in that realm. What are some ways that you kind of help pastors know, like, what's the difference between an outline generator versus I'm just speaking and teaching what ChatGPT told me about that passage? I know you've talked about this on your podcast, but maybe give some folks a frame of reference of the healthy way to use this.
Yeah, that's great. It's such a great question. It's so important. There's a difference between AI completely AI done, and AI assisted. And that's kind of the line where we as people need to keep claiming our autonomy of the things that we are putting out as our own, and allow AI to assist us to do it faster and better. But we should not allow AI to do it for us. So that's where, if a pastor tried to have an AI platform completely write their sermon, then that sermon is not theirs. It is not between them and God. It is an AI created it. And that can go for almost anything you do. Writing an email, writing a letter, writing a document, all of those related to things. You want to make sure that the AI is used to assist you and to not do it for you.
That's good. Yeah. And I even liked how, the importance of, I think I heard you say something about the importance of actually having, attribute it to AI if it's completely generated, but then you don't necessarily say, I got this from Google, or I got this quote from, Yahoo search, so there's a level of if it's you leading the way, then it's different than you're just spitting out something from the computer and pretending it's yours.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And that's where what I always say is, you want to treat anything that's generated through generative AI, which ChatGPT, ... those kinds of things, like you got it from Wikipedia. And so you would use it in the same way, where you would trust it to a certain extent, but you do want to kind of verify of what it says. And in the same way, if you're doing sermon research from Wikipedia, you are not worrying and stressing about telling your congregation hey guys, this week, I just want to be honest, I used Wikipedia to help me just research my sermon. Nobody has ever said that, ever, because it's assumed when you are preaching a sermon, you are getting your content from conversations with your neighbor. When I would write sermons, my wife probably wrote half the ideas of my sermon from just us talking through things. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. And she'd say, oh, that idea is terrible. She probably half wrote a lot. I don't say, hey guys, I just want to give a shout out to my wife this week. A conversation with my neighbor, John, the weird thing that happened at the grocery store that I just wanted to give a shout out to that. We don't do that. And AI is just another place. It's another tool that we can use. And it's almost silly to think about having to tell people that it was a part of our process, unless AI completely writes the thing.
Yeah.
At that point, then there's a transparency issue, where if you are choosing to allow AI to completely do a thing, then it could be appropriate to acknowledge that this thing was generated by AI, specifically writing.
Yeah. Well, excuse me. I do think there is, like you said, in certain areas, it makes a lot of sense. The image I showed of me in the woods, everyone knew that was not real. I don't wear Renaissance clothing, and deer and rabbits don't run up to me. But I do think there's a level of maximizing our impact, being more productive, There are things like editing these video clips. It literally wouldn't get done, or I could use this AI tool to help do it. It's not gonna, I don't think we're gonna let anyone go from our team, but it will help the people on our team do more. And as you said earlier, maybe even reach more, connect with more, and think beyond what just getting things done usually looks like.
100%. That's where I've heard people say, I'm afraid we will become less creative. And I might say the opposite is actually true. We have the ability to become more creative, but creative in different ways. For example, in SermonSpark, we added a series of fun tools. One of the tools is a scripture rewriter, where you can rewrite any scripture in like Yoda, or the one we added in was Generation Alpha, which is my youngest kid's generation. They say the weirdest things. So we built in a Generation Alpha scripture rewriter. So a pastor, I'm not saying they should or they would use that in a sermon, but if they're looking for that thing that just kind of like, they need that humor piece, or that piece that's going to wake people up, that piece in that middle of that sermon that just adds that little buzz, maybe they throw in a scripture rewritten verse and it just wakes people up. But that's added creativity, not less creativity.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, let me encourage you to go to ai-for-churches.com and book a discovery call. You can talk to David or some of the others on the team. Thank you for helping us advance the kingdom, to really take advantage of some of these new technologies to really continue to get the message of Jesus out there. Really appreciate your time, David.
Yes, thanks so much. It's great to chat.
Thanks for joining us on the Post Christian Podcast. More resources available at ericbryant.org.